There are no bad foods. Sugar isn't bad. Junk food isn't bad. I know this is a radical narrative, and some people watching this are already rolling up their sleeves ready to hate smash their keyboard with angry comments. This crops up on my social media channels a lot, and I think I could do a better job of explaining why I don't refer to foods as good and bad. Reason number one, you will struggle to find any food so bad for you that you have to avoid it entirely. If you consume excessive amounts of sugar, there are harmful health effects. Does that mean that a single teaspoon in your coffee every morning is going to fuck your shit up? No, obviously not. If you consume excessive amounts of saturated fat, there are harmful health effects. Does that mean that eating a steak occasionally is going to make you keel over and die? Obviously not. If you consume excessive amounts of anything, there are harmful health effects. Hence the word excessive. And yes, that includes water. Here's a thought experiment for you. Take someone with an incredibly healthy diet, whatever your interpretation of that is. Then pick one food that you consider unhealthy. Now, what would happen if that person with the incredibly healthy diet ate that one food once per year? Would any health marker change to a relevant degree? So what if they consumed it once per month or once per week? Looking at a single food in isolation without considering how much of it someone is eating and what the rest of their diet looks like is a bit like looking at a picture through a magnifying glass. You're focusing on part of it, but you need to zoom out if you want to see the whole image. Single popular example for you, processed meat has long been discussed for carcinogenic potential. However, one study found that although processed meat was associated with elevated cancer risk, this effect could be at least somewhat mitigated if the rest of their diet was high in fruits and non-starchy vegetables. Do you see what I'm getting at here? It isn't about unhealthy individual foods in isolation. It's more about unhealthy overall diets. A single slice of pizza isn't the health equivalent of pissing all over someone's cornflakes. It doesn't ruin it completely. Lots of pizza? Sure. But does that mean you can never ever eat it without feeling guilty? Absolutely fucking not. Which brings me to reason number two. Food psychology. When people diet, a common go-to is to automatically narrow down their food selection. Perhaps they've seen a list of bad foods they're not allowed to eat. If they start with 30 different food items in their diet, maybe they narrow that down to 25, 20, etc. Before they know it, they have slid their way into a diet which is soul-crushingly restrictive, and it fucks up their relationship with food. Food is often seen as good or bad, healthy or unhealthy, allowed or prohibited. This is referred to as dichotomous thinking, a black and white, all or nothing approach. Research has shown that this rigid mindset could be associated with elevated eating disorder symptoms and a higher BMI, whereas flexible dieting is less likely to be associated with overeating, anxiety, depression, and a higher BMI. People often think that giving the dietary advice to avoid anything bad is putting people on a smooth sailing journey to optimal health. But psychology is a complicated beast, isn't it? In reality, giving people that dietary advice to avoid anything bad turns what could be a smooth sailing journey into quite a fucking rocky one. In a landmark study from 1975, they gave subjects either 0, 1, or 2 milkshakes prior to letting them eat ice cream. Typically, if you give someone a source of food, you expect them to eat less afterwards, right? As shown with unrestrained eaters, the amount of ice cream they consumed was lower if they drank 1 milkshake and even lower again if they drank 2. But with restrained eaters, the opposite happened. They consumed more ice cream after they drank the milkshake. The theory was here, some people have dietary rules, and when these rules are broken, it opens up the floodgates. It's a bit like eating a square of chocolate and thinking, fuck it, my whole diet is ruined, and then proceeding to eat the entire contents of your fridge, kitchen cupboards, and aisle 14 of the supermarket. Does this sound familiar to you? Pick your favourite food, whatever it is. Then imagine that someone tells you that it is bad and you have to avoid it entirely. Do you stick with that effortlessly for the rest of your life? Or at some point, do you cave? And if you do cave, do you eat what you would consider to be a normal sized portion, or are you like a wild animal being let out of its cage? Extreme dietary restraint being the metaphorical cage. There are obviously healthier and less healthy foods. calorie content, macronutrient and fibre content, micronutrient content, satiety index, etc. Nobody is saying that a diet high in pizza and ice cream is the same health-wise as a diet high in unprocessed grains, lean meats, vegetables, fruits, etc. What we are saying is classifying foods as good and bad is intellectually lazy at best and dangerous at worst. I'm not the boss of you. If you want to refer to foods as good and bad and strictly avoid anything that's on the bad list, be my guest. For some people, it might be fine. But I suspect for a lot of people it is. Worse for long-term dietary adherence and puts you at a higher risk of fucking up your relationship with food. So I don't do it. The end.